Alright, so after patch 1.2 came out, and even before 1.2, I've been asked to make an updated Chongyun video, since that new ice artifact set came out. Since the update, I've been using all my resin on that domain, and I've held back making this video because I haven't found any good artifacts yet. So I've decided to just use what I got and compare with the other builds I have. So I'm going to be sharing 3 builds I think are most ideal with him, and their advantages and disadvantages of each. The first build is going to be the Blizzard Strayer build. This build revolves around frozen and shatter reactions. The second build is going to be the Gladiator build. This one maximizes the damage of your normal attacks. And the third one's going to be a combination of Noblesse and Blizzard Strayer. This is the build to maximize your ultimate damage. So the biggest advantage the Blizzard Strayer build has is that you get 40% increased crit chance when you attack enemies that are frozen. This results in more consistent crits, meaning more consistent damage. This also helps you when you don't have a high crit chance, so this can help you. The biggest advantage for Gladiator is that your normal attacks can hit higher numbers. This also helps when you're attacking cryo slams when you're unable to use cryo damage, since it increases your normal attacks regardless if it's cryo or physical. And the third build is a more uncommon playstyle, where instead of focusing on your normal attacks, you focus on the damage of your ultimate only. By focusing on your ultimate only, you can amplify the damage by only focusing on melt procs, while the others focus on frozen and shatter. However, the Gladiator build can work with melt procs too, if you can alternate keeping the enemy proc by pyro. And although shatter breaks the frozen status on enemies, if you use characters like Xingqiu or Mona, you can keep enemies frozen instantly after being shattered, so you can keep taking advantage of the Blizzard Strayer force set effect. And of course, all of these builds have disadvantages. Blizzard Strayer can't hit the highest numbers because you can't utilize melt procs. Gladiator deals the less damage when casting his E and his ultimate compared to the other two, because they have 15% increased cryo damage. And the Noblesse build has the weakest normal attacks. And you have to make sure that you can actually ult often, otherwise the damage that you focused on is not actually being used. Alright, so now I'm going to showcase each of the 3 builds. And with the 3 builds I have, I'm going to try to match the artifact stats. So I tried matching the crit damage and crit chance of each. But of course the tests are not exactly the same, so there are points of error here and there. And later on I'm going to showcase my builds and my thoughts for each. So without further ado, enjoy! Alright, to keep my builds consistent, I use the same claymore for all of them, which is the Skyward Pride. I was able to find an okay set with some crit chance and crit damage, and some energy recharge for my Blizzard Strayer set. A lot of the upgrades went into HP and defense, so it could have been better. I'm using my previous Cryo Cup, which has a pretty decent crit damage, and I haven't found anything better yet. And I have a pretty okay circlet, but because this is a Blizzard Strayer build, I'd rather have the crit damage primary stat. So with all my builds, I try to keep around the 50 to 60% crit rate range, and around 100 to 120% crit damage range. So that way the main difference will be the artifact set applied. And I also try to keep the attack boost the same. And every single one of my builds will use a Cryo Cup. So this build has 61.6% cryo damage. Alright, so moving on to my Gladiator build. I tried to pick pieces that would match the stats of the Blizzard Strayer build, and all of these artifacts are ones that I've gotten and upgraded previously. And I'm still using the same Cryo Cup as before. So this build has a little more crit chance, but a little less crit damage, and it has slightly more attack because the 2-piece set effect of Gladiator increases attack. And then my alt build has a mixture of 2-piece Noblesse and 2-piece Blizzard Strayer. Again, I chose the artifacts that would match the stats of the other ones. This time I chose a different cryo piece, because if I chose the other one, then this build would have a lot more crit damage than the other two. Again, similar crit chance and crit damage, as much as I can at least. So some quick thoughts. During my showcasing, I felt like all of the builds were really similar to each other. Of course they had the same artifact stats, but the change in artifact sets didn't really feel like anything changed. The numbers were all similar across the board, with Gladiator hitting slightly higher damage with normal attacks, and the Noblesse build hitting slightly higher ultimate damage. They ended up evening out. Then with the Blizzard build not hitting any increased damage, I was critting like every single time. So all of their disadvantages and advantages really pretty much even them all out. And here's a side-by-side comparison of all three builds. And I'm testing the damage between the time the Regisvine falls and stands back up. I made sure Chongyun has no damage for the first two builds, and that Xiangling has no damage for the third build, since with the third build you prioritize melt. And this is the part where the Regisvine stands back up. You can see that they all pretty much do the same DPS. I want to make it clear that even though these may be the ideal set effects, it really depends on 1, your playstyle, and 2, the artifacts you have. In fact, I don't use any of these builds. My current build actually has 38% crit rate and 171% crit damage. This is because I'm using the artifacts that I have that I think are the best, in my inventory at least. And with my playstyle, I benefit more from the ultimate spam, because I tend to swap characters really often, so I'm utilizing what stats I can get with the most crit damage and crit chance, while having a decent artifact set. Of course I would want Blizzard Strayer, but not until I find ones that can replace my Gladiator ones. So this is me against the Pyro Regisvine, using the exact same team that I use in the other three builds. Again, Xiangling and Chongyun don't have any artifacts. Also, I want to point out that this is not the ideal team I want to use. Team building is a major aspect in this game. Some can be used as DPS and some can be used as support. And sometimes it feels like the community wishes for all damage buffers to be removed from the game, like it's looked down upon when Bennett exists or Mona exists or even Sucrose. But in terms of team building, this is probably the ideal team for me when considering my own playstyle and swapping characters often. You have to think about who's your DPS and if there's any elemental resonance happening. And then you have to think about what your party members can do for your DPS. For example, my Sucrose can increase my melt procs. And of course, if you're doing a shatter build, then your team changes. You need at least one character to apply frozen with you. If you want the cryo resonance in your team, then you adjust that. Having someone like Kaya can even work. But if you need a healer, then you adjust it again. Having Chi-Chi works, or even Diona. Bennett also works as a healer if you don't care about the elemental resonance. He also gives you a nice damage buff too. And for a shatter build, you might even want Albedo, because he also increases your elemental mastery, resulting in stronger shatters, if you prefer him over Sucrose. Or if you'd rather have the Verdance set effect, you can use Venti, where he can constantly apply elements with his infused ultimate. And if you're having trouble applying Hydro, just add another one. Barber can do the job and heal at the same time. And you can even have 2 elemental resonances in your team. This will help with energy recharge for all your characters, so just build your team however you like and what roles you want them to play. There really is no right or wrong team comp. It's all about what you want and how you're going to take advantage of it. Alright, that's all for my tips and guides, as well as my thoughts and opinions. And see you in the next video.